a production of the New Jersey courts.
We were talking about social life, and
Yes,
you were saying you went
right.
down to Delaware State
Yes,
sometimes.
we'd go down to Delaware State. Some weekends we might go to Cheney. But one of the troublesome issues was that transportation. We needed to have a car in order to get to these places. So my parents were pretty good to me, and they allowed me to have the second car at times at Delaware. And you'd have to try to find a spot to keep it, because freshmen were not supposed to have cars at the school. So somewhere off campus, I was able to find a place to keep the car for some period of time when I was there, at Delaware. So then we used the car, and we'd get together, my roommate and I, we'd drive down to either Del State or Cheney. Both of us had acquaintances or friends attending those schools, so that we meet up and maybe go to a dance or something there at those institutions.
Were you in a fraternity at UDEL?
I was. In fact, I was probably the first African American to pledge a fraternity at UDEL. I pledged Alpha Epsilon Pi. It was a Jewish fraternity at the time, and most students pledged when they were in their first year. I did not pledge until my sophomore year. I didn't think I was going to be pledging, because most of the fraternities did not accept African Americans in them at the time. But a number of my Jewish friends asked me to pledge AE Pi, and I went over and looked at it and decided to pledge, and they accepted me as a pledge. And it turned my social life around at Delaware, being a member of Alpha Epsilon Pi. I have great memories and fond memories of the brothers, as well as the activities that they had. I would invariably bring someone either from Glassboro or friends from outside to date, but it was a wonderful occasion. It just made my social life so much more enjoyable, being a member of the fraternity.
I'm curious, I know at Rutgers at the time, fraternities kind of dominated the social scene. Was it similar at
It was similar
UDEL?
at UD, yes. The fraternities had all the parties. Most of the football players were in Theta Chi, and you'd hear about some of the great parties. And I was happy to join AE Pi. They had great parties too, and it made a difference in college life.
Now, were you aware if anybody else had tried to get into one of the other
fraternities?
Yeah, and been blackballed, or was it just
No.
an unspoken rule?
Just an unspoken rule.
Okay.
You know, fraternities, you're invited pretty much, and you go around. I don't recall even going around to the fraternities' open houses to see which one you might want to pledge when I was a first-year student, and did not go until I was in my second year.
Now, did they have ROTC?
They did. Delaware is a land-grant institution, and everyone was required to be a participant in ROTC for your first 2 years. So I, along with everyone else, was a participant, and I did well. I moved up, and this was in the early '60s, so of course we still had the draft, and Vietnam is starting to pick up somewhat. So I felt that it was a pretty good chance that I'd be drafted when I got out of college. So I decided to go into advanced ROTC, the third and fourth year of college, and I did. I was a member of the Scabbard and Blade, which is like an honor society in the military of ROTC, and I did well. And that meant when I got out of University of Delaware, I would start as a second lieutenant in the Army.
Would they do field exercises, or was it mostly drill and classroom work?
Mostly drill and classroom work. In fact, mostly, yeah, some drill and classroom, I guess 1 or 2 hours a week. And so it wasn't bad. As I said, I did well. It was a A course for me, so that was always nice. And I think your 3rd and 4th year, you start receiving a stipend as if you're in the military. It wasn't a great deal, maybe like 20-some bucks a month, but still at that time you could live on 27 bucks a month.
Now, tell me a little bit about your decision to study poli-sci.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Academically, what were you interested in? And
well, I was never clear on what I wanted to do in life. I realized I wanted to work with people. I always got along well with people. So I thought that I would study sociology. I started out in sociology, and I had sociology courses, did pretty well on them. But there was this one course that I did not want to take. It was sociological theory. And in my 2nd and 3rd year, I started taking some political science courses that I liked a lot. So I decided that this sociological theory course was not going to be one on my list of courses I took, and switched majors in my 4th year to political science. So needless to say, in order to get my 30 credits to graduate in a major, I took a lot of political science courses my 4th year. But I always had a load of 18 credits or so I was able to do that my senior year and graduated in the 4 years.
Any professors stand out, either as particularly interesting or maybe not so helpful?
I thought they were all helpful. I recall Professor Dolan, D-O-L-A-N. He was always an interesting teacher, and I enjoyed the political courses that I took with him. I never got close to any of my professors so that I would see them afterwards or attend functions, but I enjoyed him as a teacher.
Now, you were there from 60 to 64.
That's correct.
And you mentioned part of the reason you went for advanced ROTC was the draft. Vietnam is a growing concern. Was it, by 64, was it taught about a lot on campus or in your classes?
No, not a great deal. That was, I mean, it's still a ways off as far as, and you're talking about what you're doing in school and activities there. So no, I never talked about military afterwards while I was at Delaware.
When did you make the decision to go to law school?
Well, in my last year at Delaware, I had a friend from high school who was attending Harvard Law School. He was a year ahead of me, of course, because he's already in law school. And somehow he contacted me about coming to law school. He knew that I had been a leader in high school. I was president, as I mentioned, I was president of student council, and he and I had run together on one of the tickets, I guess. He had run for president, and I was running for vice president when I was a sophomore. He was a junior. Unfortunately, he did not win, but I did, so I continued on in the student council. And but we maintained a friendship, and he said, if you're thinking about law school, Harvard's a great place to be. So I always thought about law as one of the possible occupations I might ultimately gravitate to. So I decided to apply to law school. I thought that even if I didn't practice law, it would be great to have that kind of a background for whatever I did in life. So I applied to a number of different law schools, one of which was Harvard. And I had a major decision to make because at the same time I was interviewing for a possible job because I'm not sure I'm going to go to law school. At that time, Chrysler was a major car manufacturer in Delaware, in Newark, Delaware. And that was one of the places I went for an interview. and I actually had a job offer in their labor management department. So I had a decision whether to go to law school or to take this job. I ultimately decided, of course, to go to law school. I was fortunately accepted at, if most, if not all, the schools I applied to, one of which was Harvard. So it was almost impossible to turn down an acceptance at Harvard. I thought that would be great exposure and experience and something I would love the challenge to do. And so I accepted they accepted me and I accepted them, went on to Harvard.
Before we leave UDEL, I wanted to ask a little bit about playing on the football team.
Sure.
Any, I guess, games that stand out in your memory particularly? But I also want to get a sense of what it was like playing at that time.
Well, Delaware was always respected as a football power, although the year I started, 1960, was one of our weaker years. We did not do that well. When I was a sophomore, I was fortunate enough, I stayed healthy. Some of the backs that were ahead of me in preseason were injured, and as a result, I was a starting halfback in my second year at Delaware. And we opened up, we started doing well. We won our first 4 games. My roommate was, and this was new for Delaware because they had 2 starting African-American halfbacks. I don't think ever before did they have, they probably had one other African-American on that had played at Delaware. And this 1961 season, Mike was left halfback and I was right halfback as the starting running backs. At that time, there was a platoon system. So most universities had 2 teams that you play half of a quarter and then the other team would come in. That was because of the limited substitution rule. I think it ended up you could only substitute on 1st and 4th downs. Normally the specialists would come in. 4th down, the punter would come in, the quarterback would go off. Center might be a specialist, he might come in. So there was limited substitution. So you had to play both ways. Now, I was a high school quarterback. I didn't play defense in high school. So I had to learn how to play defense as a football player at Delaware. And of course, they had very good teachers. David Nelson was my head coach. Tubby Raymond was my backfield coach. Milo Lude was the line coach who actually recruited me to go to Delaware. And they were outstanding people as well as outstanding coaches. So I enjoyed the coaching experience. I never had a bad moment. I saw good leaders, those that knew their craft, knew how to teach and knew how to coach, and I was very happy. Plus, they were both around my size, 2 of them, Coach Nelson and Coach Raymond, so we looked at each other eye to eye. It was, I had no thoughts that I was not given an opportunity to play. And as I said, I started as a sophomore ahead of some other people. Some of them had gotten injured, but once I was in the starting position, I stayed there. As I said, I was lucky that I had no injuries that would sit me on the bench.
What was like the big game of the season, usually?
Well, I think Bucknell was probably the big game because it was generally the last game. And from my junior and senior year, it was for normally the conference title. Back up as far as an experience as a sophomore, in high school I'd punt, I'd kick off, kick extra points, as well as the quarterback. So I did almost everything in high school. You're a little bit more specialized when you get to college. However, our place kicker was injured. So I kicked, as a sophomore, I kicked extra points for the first several games until he was able to come back. So that was another little experience side like that I had as a player at Delaware. But one of the earliest negative experiences I had, as I said, we started out my sophomore year winning the first 4 games. And then we're playing Ohio University at Delaware. And we're ahead by 5 points, I think it is. And they're punting to us. I'm the punt returner. I drop back. I catch the ball, and a guy puts his helmet on the ball, and I fumble. They recover, go down and score. And it tightens the game up. I think we're now ahead by 3 points. They go for a 2-point conversion. I'm sorry, 2 points would have tied it, so whatever the differential is, but I intercepted the pass, so they didn't score, so we're still ahead by several points, by 2 points. We get the ball, we drive down, we don't do much, we have to punt with less than a minute to go. Unfortunately, they drive down, and they end up kicking a 48-yard field goal to beat us by a point, and we end up being 4-4 that season. So that was on the negative side, but I mean, I bounced back. One of the good things my junior year, in the Bucknell game, we're 6-2, vying for a Middle Atlantic Conference, because that was the conference we played in then, as well as they have a Lambert Cup champion, which is emblematic of the outstanding college for that season. And we were playing Bucknell, as I said, and it was a tough game. And I broke away for a 50-yard run, which enabled us to kick a field goal to win the game. Other than that, I just had a consistent college football career that was full of fun and lacked injury, which was good.
What would you do during the summers in college?
In college, this summer, I played baseball for American. It wasn't an American Legion, but it was an American Legion type team, because we played some American Legion teams, as well as work. One of the jobs I had was I worked for Public Works in Pittman, which meant at that time, public work people picked up the trash. They cut the grass around on public places that needed grass cutting. So I could be seen riding a mower around town, a tractor mower, going to different spots to cut grass. That's the kind of thing. In addition, if I didn't do that, I would have been working with my father in the cleaning plant.
Now, you said your sisters had also graduated from college?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, my oldest sister went to Hampton. My second sister went to Howard. In fact, back up, my oldest sister was a registered nurse from Hampton. My second sister, Sylvia, she was a music teacher, graduate from Howard. And my other sister, Jackie, she went to Ohio State and graduated in social work, and then on to various activities, one of which was the Peace Corps.
Now, I'm wondering, how overt was it, your parents encouraging you guys to go to college? Or was it just sort of by osmosis?
It was sort of known that you'd go to college. You know, my oldest sister, Shirley, she's about 9 years older than I am. So, I mean, they had gone to college, so I was much younger when they started college. And I remember their friends coming home with them at maybe Thanksgiving or Christmas. Those that had lived in maybe in Texas or a foreign, much farther away school location, they would not go home, so they'd go someplace with their friends, and then frequently there would be friends at my house. And I always enjoyed their friends because I was a younger brother, so they always took care of me. And it was just sort of known I was going to go to college.
Now, tell me a little bit about getting settled up at Harvard. You were entering in the fall of '64?
Fall of '64, entered Harvard. It was just a nice experience, because Harvard, now I'm meeting people from all over the United States and foreign countries too. It was very challenging. You have somewhat of an awe for the Harvard Law School experience. I think we have a general meeting of all the first-year law students in the first week, and they tell you what was going to be happening, what this system was, and at one time they would say, look to your right, look to your left. One of you will graduate, the other two won't. But it was different. When I got there, things have changed. They made it harder for you to get there, and expected that if you were there, that you should end up as a lawyer after 3 years. That was good, but one of the sort of unusual experiences at Harvard the first year is that you had sort of three groups that then the whole first year class would be one of those three groups, and you attended the same courses that were for your group. You didn't have any choice selection. So you attended whatever courses, and the basic contracts, criminal law, civil procedure, and you had those courses. However, there was only one final exam in May. So you started in September, and you didn't have the final until May. So you know, you're a little apprehensive about making sure you remember everything that you were taught from day one. They did have a practice exam in January. So you got a chance to see the type of questions and see how you might do on an exam. And so I did okay. I always had confidence I would be successful, and things turned out that it didn't hurt me. I mean, I studied hard the last 6 weeks before the finals. You really studied and worked hard. I worked when I was at Harvard. I worked at the Harvard Faculty Club, which was mostly weekend. I might attend a bar serving incident or party at the faculty club. I remember the Kennedys were there at times, and it was fun. Some professors would then hire you to serve at a private party at their house. So I did that as a first, second, and third year law student.
You know, you mentioned the test not coming till the end. That usually stands out in most lawyers' minds. But also the Socratic Method and its use in the class. And
yes.
The stand and deliver.
That was also quite intimidating. You know, there were days you were not prepared. You'd sit on the back seat instead of in your seat, and the professor would have a chart, because I'd say there were like 120 in the class. So he'd have a chart with your picture, and so he knew who he was calling on. And there were days that if you had a rough weekend or you weren't prepared, you might not be in your seat, but in the class still learning, but hoping that you wouldn't get called on. Sometimes they'd call on you anyhow, because they would see you in the back. But yes, the Socratic Method, you'd be called on to participate in class, to answer various questions about a case that you were studying. Some of it was intimidating. One of my classes, I think for civil procedure, was Charles Allen Wright, who subsequently became counsel to President Nixon at some point. He also was the Wright on federal courts, the standard book for everyone would look at for federal court procedure. So he was a visiting professor from Texas, and it was a great experience to have him. He was amazing. He had a photographic memory. He'd come in to teach a whole course and not have a stitch of paper or anything around, and if you made reference to a particular case, and he could cite the page and the issue, and he was just fantastic as a professor, and he taught well. Not only was he bright and brilliant, he was a very good teacher and got his points across very well.
What about the second year? That's
yeah, second year
more ability to
you can now make some selective courses. There's still basic courses. I think evidence was second year. I started some property. No, property was first year. But I tax course and a few other you could select in your second and third year courses. state planning eventually, and it was a varied subject matter that you were able to choose. Not like it is today. I think you can pretty much make a decision the type of law you want to be in, and I don't know what, if any, standardized courses you have to take in this day and age.
Did you have a trajectory in mind?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. I did not have, I still did not know what I wanted to do. I didn't know whether I wanted to practice law or not as I'm entering my third year. I did have a unique opportunity. I lived off campus, and one of my neighbors was going to be the head coach of a local Catholic high school in Newton. And he knew that I had played football at Delaware, so he asked me to be the offensive coordinator and defensive secondary coach. So I had an opportunity as a third-year law student to coach at a local high school, which was a lot of fun. It took a lot of time, but I was able to complete my studies as well as participate as a high school coach, football coach.
Was that the first time you had actually coached?
That was my first time I actually coached a team, yes. Okay. I had assisted, well, no, I was refereeing in basketball. For the I mentioned I played 7th, 8th grade basketball. The referees were older basketball players from the high school generally. And I did that when I was a junior and senior. I refereed some of the 7th, 8th grade basketball games. So I got used to seeing how basketball was refereed as well as played.
So did you have time for any other activities at Harvard Law, like Law Journal or?
No, I was not a member of Law Journal. I was a middle of the class student. I was in the top 50%, but I was not on the Law Journal. Did participate in athletic activities that were sponsored by the law school. We had flag football and a basketball team. In the spring, I don't think there was anything because it was getting close to the final period. So you focus more on your law school activities. But I did not participate in other activities at Harvard other than the working and the sports aspect of it.
And in the summers, did you do any like internships or
I did.
That sort of thing?
Between my second and third year, I clerked in the Attorney General's office. I had an uncle, Horace Bryant, who was Commissioner of Banking and Insurance, and I applied to the state of New Jersey for a position and was able to work in the Attorney General's office for that summer. The prior summers, now I'm over 21, and I worked my father's taproom bar in the evening hours and had another job during the daytime.
Do any experiences from that internship at the Attorney General's office stand out?
Not really, other than meeting a lot of good young attorneys from other law schools and just, you know, struggling to try to do your job, not sure, because now you're doing what an attorney does, making sure that what you did was good and acceptable for the attorney you were working with. And most of it was an administrative agency that the attorney was responsible for. The issues that came up for that agency you would do research for and perhaps write a brief of some sort responding to those issues.
Now, had you made arrangements with the Army to do your active duty afterwards, or were there any issues related to that?
I was lucky.
Okay.
Some people were drafted or told to report right away. I had indicated that I wanted to go to law school, and they allowed me to defer my active military duty till after I graduated from law school. So, and I think being a member of Scabbard and Blade, the Honor Society, may have helped. I don't know. I'm just surmising because others were not as fortunate as I was. Although my good friend Bob Francis, who, in fact, short digression, we attended from kindergarten through University of Delaware together. And then he went on to Rutgers Law School in Camden, and I went to Harvard. But he was also deferred. So we were able to do our law school opportunity and studies before we went into the military. I was given, I guess, about 6 months after graduation before I had to go in. During the, you're probably going to ask me about employment, but from a chronological sequence, near the end of your third year, you start interviewing for law firms. And I interviewed mostly Newark, New Jersey, and Philadelphia. I had an offer from one of the major law firms in Newark and another offer from Montgomery McCracken, Walker Rhodes in Philadelphia. I wanted to stay down in the South Jersey, Pennsylvania area, so I accepted the Montgomery McCracken offer. And it was a good experience for me. Things worked out well. I took the Pennsylvania bar, not the New Jersey at that time in 1967. And as I start work for Montgomery McCracken, I am assigned to a case that's been in the law firm for about 8 or 9 years. Several different appeals went up, but it hadn't been tried yet. It was an antitrust case. And I'm assigned to this. I'm like third person down in the hierarchy on the case. So I'm doing a lot of the grunt work as far as getting evidence ready together for the trial. So I start in July, and the trial starts in September. So for a 2-month period, and it was in the antitrust dealing with the legitimate theater, which is movie theaters, legitimate theater, acting theaters, both Philadelphia and New York. William P. Goldman, who also had a theater in Philadelphia, alleged that the Schubert theaters had an antitrust violation. They required these plays to play the Schubert theaters in the outlying cities of Chicago, Philadelphia, and others, to play the Schubert theaters in order to get into the Schubert theaters in New York. Now, Schubert had great theater locations and big known theaters in New York. They had the Schubert Theater in Philadelphia and the Walnut Street Theater. And so William P. Goldman brings this action saying that he didn't get shows in his theater in Philadelphia because the Schuberts required those plays to play in the Walnut and in the Schubert Theater. So I got a chance to visit, and I knew nothing about the legitimate theater industry, but I got a chance to meet a lot of the people, local people in that industry. Visited New York, met with counsel there, and did a lot of different things. And then in September, I was able to sit in federal court during the trial that took place in September and October and mid part of November. So it was a fairly long trial. I got exposed to a lot of different things, and while there, I was got the notice that I had passed the bar exam. So I was admitted probably in federal court before I was in the state court, because I was going to court every day, and I think Judge Kraft was the judge, and I was able to be sworn in there.
What happened with the case?
We won most of it, but lost a portion that went up on appeal. And this is after I've left, because in 1st of January, I had to report for military duty. But I learned later that we lost, and then it ultimately settled.
Now, this in-court experience, did you find that it really encouraged you in that direction in the law, or?
It encouraged me that I like being a lawyer. I like trying to find out solutions for other people. and to represent them, to try to do the best I could for the individuals. One of the nice things about being with Montgomery McCracken, I did some corporate work in the meantime. I did some estate work, and I got a nice little sampling, which is what I wanted to see where I wanted to be ultimately. I was never sure where I wanted to ultimately be, but because after that 6-month window, I went into the military. But the experience at Montgomery McCracken was a wonderful challenge for me. Again, I was only African American in the law firm at the time. I was hoping that it would grow, but it didn't, as far as the numbers while I was there. And then I left for the military in January of 1968.
Now, I forgot to ask, when you were at Harvard Law, were you also one of only a few African Americans?
Yes, I think there are about 15 now, but this is a large number for me. First time I've been exposed to 15, and that's probably 15 out of about 500 in the first year. There were probably about 20 women out of the 500. So things were still tough for minorities as well as for women back in the mid-60s.